The Time of the Ghost, Chapter 8. And it was a foot. It was a foot and a leg encased in plaster, raised up in front of her eyes by a sort of pulley. The face which had so terrified her were the toes of the foot, which the plaster did not quite cover. She lay and stared at it. Is Monaghan only a leg? She wondered in some bewilderment. One of my legs, she corrected herself. Somehow she had no doubt that leg was part of her. She could feel it aching in a dismal, distant way. She could feel the other leg aching too, and just catch glimpses of it lower down, also in plaster. She was not really able to move. Just trying to see made everything turn grey. She shut her eyes and lay sniffing smells of antiseptic and polish. She could hear machinery humming in the distance, something clattering rather nearer, the squeak of shoes on polished tiles, and brisk voices not very far away. Before she opened her eyes again, she was fairly sure she was in hospital. Sure enough, when she forced herself to look again, she could see her stand to her right, holding high up a transparent bag of red stuff that looked like blood. Tubes led down from the bag and vanished out of sight where her arm must be. That seemed to be the arm that she could move a little. The other arm, when she swiveled her eyes that way, was raised up in plaster too. She had a feeling something was also wrong with her head. It hurt and she could not move it, but nothing hurt very much. It was all remote and dreary. No wonder I thought I had an accident, she thought. I wonder how I got this way. She had to close her eyes again then, and her question was answered almost immediately. Once again she was a floating nothingness, but this time it was more of a as you float in dreams. She knew she was laying in bed. She lay and she floated, and she saw, driving away from her at furious speed, a small, powerful car. She could see the heads of two people through its back window. But as she saw them, the two people were clearly fighting. The one on the right who was driving was bigger. The heads were swaying over to the left as the bigger one won. The car gave a sharp wobble, and its left-hand door came open. It continued to go at furious speed. The door was blown almost shut with the speed, and then forced open again to let a lady tumble out. She tumbled just like a doll, helplessly to the rushing road, and like a doll, went on tumbling for yards and yards, because her foot was hooked in a long loop of black seatbelt. When at last her foot came loose, the car door slammed shut, and the car sped away, leaving the doll-like crumpled lady lying at the side of the road. Although she had no sense that this happened to her, it was not a pleasant thing to see. The strong one driving that car had intended to throw the lady out. There was no question about that. She brought her eyes open and again tried to look at the hospital she was in. This time she grasped that she was in a small room at the end of a bigger ward. There were no windows in the room, but most of its walls were glass, so there was sufficient bleak grey light. Beyond, in the ward, the light was warm and sunny. She had glimpses of more white plastered legs and of a nurse walking with a lady. She had just closed her eyes again when the nurse came into her glass room. She heard the nurse's voice. "I think she should be awake now. What name did you say it was?" A very well-known voice, clear and pleasant, said, "Sally. Selina, really, but we say Sally." Then the nurse was bending over the bed. "Try to wake up, dear. Here's your sister Sally to see you. She's been waiting for hours." Highly confused, the person in the bed opened her eyes on swimming greyness. "Then who am I?" she wondered. She heard someone give a distressed noise. No doubt she was an awful sight. "Are you awake? Can you hear me?" She managed to focus on her sister. It was all a bit grey still, but she could see. It was the lady she'd seen walking with the nurse, a grown-up lady, but it must be Sally. There was the fair hair that had surprised her in the farmhouse, now scraped back and done up somehow in a way that did not seem very pretty, although it could have been fashionable. Not that this lady had a very fashionable air. She was drab and depressed and seemed to be trying not to cry, but the depressed face had a right slight hawkiness to it, and there was no question that they knew one another very well. "I can hear you," she mumbled. It hurt a bit to speak, but not too much. "Oh, then I'm sorry," Sally burst out nearly in tears. "This is all my fault. It was me going on at you that did it. It was all my missionary zeal, telling you you really must finish with Julian Addiman. You do know what happened to you, do you?" She thought the doll-like lady in the car. "Julian Addiman threw me out of his car," she said. It did not worry her just then. She felt sorry for Julian Addiman in a way, because he'd been bound to Monaghan. and was going to have to murder her after 7 years. 7 years have passed, she said. It seemed a reasonable guess. But she did wish she could remember even a single one of the things that must have happened in those 7 years. Sally said, "Look, I brought you some flowers. Here." Flowers were put in front of her face where she could see them. They were lilies. Some were flaming speckled tag lilies, some delicate pink and gold, some white and some yellow. They were beautiful waxy things with big dusty stamens. She could not imagine them growing. "Do you like them?" She tried to nod and found she could not, but she managed to smile. "Lovely." "Just as if I was dead." "Oh, don't!" her sister cried out. "You're not dead. Listen." And she embarked on some kind of explanation. It was rambling and it was tearful, and it seemed to be some kind of self-accusation. Perhaps it was about Monaghan, but the patient did not know. She found it hard to listen. All that came over to her was a rather familiar dismalness. Her sister blamed herself about Julian Adiman and the accident. It was true, but she was also far more worried and discontented about herself, as one would be after 7 years of Monaghan, the patient supposed. And she was expecting her injured sister to listen to it all and bear the weight of her discontent as if there was nothing wrong with her. It was all just as usual, and it was exhausting. "Sally," the patient said at length, "please, talking hurts my head." Sally's reply was to burst into tears. "Oh dear," she sobbed. "I'm sorry, I'll go. I really have to go. I waited as long as I could, but I have to get hold of one of my teachers before this evening. I'll come back after that, shall I?" "Yes," said the patient, hoping she could stand it by then. She closed her eyes and floated in greyness, trying to puzzle out what seemed to have happened. She was one of the 4 Melford sisters who had once, as a game, invented the worship of Monaghan. Sally had gone on with the game and taught it to Julian Adiman, and had ended by dedicating herself to Monaghan. But after that, the dedication seemed to have got passed on to one of Sally's sisters. The question was, which one? If she was not Sally, who was she? She tried looking back at her experiences as a ghost to see if she felt any more fellow feeling for Cart, Imogen or Fenella. Not really, except for Imogen when Imogen was dangling like a crazy scarecrow under the beam, and that might have only been because she knew what it felt like to be at the point of death. A thought struck her. If Sally came to see me, then the others will come too. I shall know that the one who doesn't come must be me. That seemed clever until it occurred to her that she could ask the nurse who she was, but she found she was ashamed to ask. It seemed so silly not to know, even though all the nurses must know that she'd lost her memory. It was clear she must have lost her memory. 7 years had passed, or at least enough time for her sister Sally to grow into a drab, depressed lady, out of which she knew one fact: Julian Adiman had done his best to kill her. All the rest was blank, except for what she knew from being a ghost. And the funny part was, apart from the last half hour of that time, Julian Adiman had not seemed important at all. She had not even remembered him. That suggested she must be Imogen or Fenella, for Cart had clearly fancied him, at least for a time. But the fact was, she did not feel like any of them. Perhaps she was a case of mistaken identity. No, that could not be true. Sister Sally was familiar, and her discontent was the most familiar thing of all. The home and the parents she had visited as a ghost had definitely been hers, and a funny home it was. She found herself realizing everyone so strange, and her parents so busy, and no cooker in the kitchen. Could it have been a mad, feverish dream? No, she knew it had been real and true. That school had really existed, perhaps did exist still. The frightening thing was that the Monaghan part had also been real, which meant that somehow after 7 years were up, she had been released as a ghost to visit the cause of her death. No, because she was still alive. It was horribly confusing. A beautiful thought struck her. Monaghan meant to kill her, but thanks to modern medicine she didn't manage it. Soothed by this idea, she went to sleep, but it worked in her head, distrustfully. The result was that, when she woke up and found someone else by her bed, the first thing she said was, "What date is it?" 16th of July, the person sitting there replied promptly. "You've been unconscious 20 hours as near as they can work out. You was brought in here 8:30 last night and they thought you was a goner. I can tell you. They were half the night doing jigsaws on you. Did you know you had 192 stitches in you? Fact. I asked the office," the visitor said gleefully, and then she added with thoughtful relish, "They won't half hurt coming out too." The patient turned her eyes and gazed at, not a perfect stranger. She knew she'd seen this new lady somewhere before, but she could not imagine. She saw a smart, not quite elderly lady who had starved off advancing years by dyeing her hair bright ginger and using quantities of orange lipstick. She was wearing an exotic coat made of alternating areas of bald mauve plastic and curly lavender fur. The patient knew she'd never seen that before. It was truly memorable. But the fat green and orange shopping bag dumped on the lady's knee was not entirely strange, nor were the bright gleeful eyes and the dry, perky features of the face beneath the ginger curls. "Here," said the lady, digging busily in the green and orange bag. "I brought you some grapes. Got them on the station when I got in. Awful price they were, but then everything is these days." Her hand, plump and wrinkled, came into sight, dangling a mighty bunch of big green grapes. "Like them?" she said. "Green is the best kind for eating, I always say. I thought of getting you flowers, but I didn't dare. I didn't see you with your artistic tastes liking anything I could buy." "Thank you," said the patient feebly. She did not like to say she could not move enough to eat the grapes. However, her visitor had thought of that. "Don't look as if you could move much the mess you're in," she said. "Like me to pop one into your mouth?" She seemed to gather that the patient did not welcome this idea. Unconcerned, she laid the grapes down, out of sight somewhere, and rummaged in her bag again while she talked. "They had a proper job tracing you, I can tell you, after they brought you in. You don't have to tell me what happened to you. It's common knowledge. That no-good boyfriend of yours threw you out of his car. The trouble was, he went off with your handbag. I hope they've got him by now. There was plenty of witnesses. More fool him for choosing a main road. Someone got to you almost at once, thank the good Lord. But all the hospital had to go on to find out who you was were one of those school name tapes in your old shirt. And all that said was Melford. I ask you, they was all night and half this morning trying to trace you. They got you through the art school in the end. You'd have seen me last night if, well, you weren't in a fit state to see then, but you know what I mean." The rummaging had at least produced a dingy old tobacco tin and some cigarette papers. The visitor proceeded to roll herself a cigarette and talk continued to gush out of her. The patient stared. Who was this lady? Her landlady? That seemed the most likely idea. "Just Melford," said the visitor, laying tobacco along a fragile strip of paper. "That's your mum all over, making one set of tapes do for the four of you. If she could have brought herself to get you a set each, they'd have had that much more to go on, wouldn't they?" She asked, rolling the paper around the tobacco. "All economy is false economy," she declared, with her orange lips parted ready to lick the paper. She licked it, stuck it down and continued. "As I've told your mum over and over again, skimping only leads to trouble. And don't say I'm not proved right by this," she concluded. She stuck the withered little cigarette triumphantly in her mouth and lit it with a huge mock agate lighter. That proved to be the clue. Many and many a time on raids to the school kitchen had the patient seen just a withered bent cigarette, usually bearing a long trembling length of ash, sticking straight out of her visitor's face as it bent over a mixing bowl. Now she knew she could see that there had actually been an expectant groove in the orange upper lip, waiting to be filled by that cigarette. "Mrs. Gill!" she exclaimed. Mrs. Gill crouched guiltily under a wave of blue smoke. "What? Am I going to be in trouble for smoking on the wards?" "Oh, no," said the patient. "It's just—" She found that she could not bear to let Mrs. Gill know how blank her memory was. "I've only just placed you. I don't think I've ever seen you dressed up before." Mrs. Gill laughed, a strong, whirring chuckle. That was well known too. Fenella said it sounded like someone trying to start a car. "You'll bet you haven't, dear. I don't wear my good things to work, but I could see you couldn't place me. That's because you're in shock." "In shock? They told me when I asked at the office. I found out all about you. I thought your mum and dad ought to know. I've got it all written down here. Like me to read it out to you?" "No thanks," the patient said hurriedly. One of Mrs. Gill's most outstanding characteristics was a love of gory details. "Yes, you'd be better off not knowing," Mrs. Gill said. Her manner suggested that the very least thing wrong was a broken neck. "They'll tell you when you're off the danger list, I expect. Anyway, the hospital phoned through to the school around break, but it's the end of term, you know. Your father's up to his eyes in exams, and your mum's packing all the boys' trunks. Work, 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 you know how they are. So I phoned your sisters and then said I'd pop up to town and see you for her. Mind you," she said, Mind you, said Mrs. Gill. She spoke with some viciousness. The patient instantly had dim memories of 1,000 rows between Mrs. Gill and Phyllis. Mind you, I don't grudge the fare to London one bit, but I'm quite as able to pack a boy's trunk as what she is. Frankly, I nearly said to her, Mrs. Melford, here's one of your daughters lying at death's door, and all you can think about is packing socks and shirts. But I held my tongue. I'm not one to pick a quarrel. Of course not, said the patient. She was feeling grey again. Mrs. Gill had brought her back to the reality of her time as a ghost. Mrs. Gill, do you remember a ghost about 7 years ago? Mrs. Gill made her starting motor chuckle. You mean that time I saw right through one of you and threw custard all over the kitchen? You were a wicked lot. Been up to black magic, hadn't you? Got half the boys in on it too. Oh yes, I remember the row there was, and all 4 of you packed off to your grannies for corrupting the lads. But as I said to Lily at the time, those boys don't need corrupting. Boys never do. And it was only a silly bit of child's play when all's said and done. I never saw the harm in that. Do you really think there was no harm in it? She asked eagerly. Mrs. Gill tipped her ginger curls to one side and considered. I wouldn't say you was little innocents, she said. Wicked is wicked and harm is harm at any age, but children get up to things. Kids left to themselves get up to everything. But your father should have laughed it off, to my mind. You don't want to take the idea with you that you're wicked into when you're grown up. That's where the harm is. You don't grow up proper if you think you're wicked. But that's all over and done with now, and I'm worried about your father. He's not well. He ought to retire, really. But you get some that can't do that. My cousin's husband dropped dead the night after he retired. She told me. She said work was his life, and... Oh, hello, Charlotte, dear. Fancy you getting here so quick. Cart's voice, as well known as any, answered from somewhere out of sight. It wasn't very quick, I'm afraid. I was supposed to be going to France with my tutor to look after her children, and I had to see her and explain I couldn't go. Ah, she probably has sisters she's close to, too, Mrs. Gill said wisely. She knew how you felt. Yes, she has, Cart said rather brusquely. Then I had to hitch up from Cambridge, and that took ages. She came into sight and stood looking over the plaster, the bandages, and the bag of blood with evident horror. This looks an utter mess. How is she? In shock, dear. Mrs. Gill leapt up from her chair with a clatter. She and Cart retired almost out of sight and began holding one of those muttered conversations which makes any patient feel they must be at death's door. This patient did not mind. She knew she was at death's door. It was only July the 16th. Monaghan would be able to claim her just after midnight. She would have to tell Cart. Chiefly she was occupied in staring at Cart. Cart, who she remembered as a blue bolster with a blurred face. It brought back a scene around 7 years ago, probably just before their school broke up for the summer holidays, when she and Cart had been coming out of school. At the bus stop had been standing a line of girls, some from Boots across the road, 2 from the school office, and a group from the Poly down the street. She and Cart had wondered how all these grown-up girls came to be so incredibly slim and pretty. They had wondered what happened in 5 or 7 years to work such a change. They looked at the other girls coming out of school, and they looked at one another. I don't know, Cart had said gloomily. It must take a miracle. That miracle had happened to Cart. She was evidently a student. Her jeans were old and patched. Her check shirt was tied in a knot at her waist. Her fair hair simply hung. And she was one of the prettiest girls the patient had ever seen. It was not only that she was slim and fair and young, and she looked younger now than she had looked as a bolster. She had a clear, glowing, confident look. She looked as if she felt as lovely as she looked. It was awesome. She watched Cart smile radiantly at Mrs. Gill. Then I'll come back and talk to you about it before you go. You'll want to come back and say goodbye anyway, won't you? I'll tell you what, I came in through casualty. There were some awfully comfortable seats in the waiting room there. Why don't you wait there? Just the job, agreed Mrs. Gill. She leant forward to stare brightly at the patient's face. Ta-ta for now, dear. At least you're not dead yet, eh? Uttering her starting motor chuckle, she vanished. Oh, Cart, the patient said weakly. It was naughty of you to send her to casualty. Cart's clear features bunched into a more familiar look of anger. She's an old ghoul. Nothing delights her more than broken bones and buckets of gore. She was absolutely gloating over you. I know. Weak tears greyed at the sight of Cart's angry face. I know she was, but you're not being fair all the same. She came because Mother couldn't, and she paid her own fare, and she brought me a beautiful bunch of grapes. Yes, typical of our parents, Cart said, swinging herself angrily into the chair by the bed. They can't be bothered, so they send Mrs. Gill instead. And Mrs. Gill goes, because then she can tell all her neighbours how they don't come near you, even when you're at death's door. Oh, don't cry, I'm sorry. I know Mrs. Gill was being quite as kind as she was being horrible, but it doesn't make it any less true, and that's what makes me angry. Now tell me how you are and what happened, or don't you know? Is it true that rat Addyman slung you out of his car? Oh, don't cry. I suppose you're still as crazy about him as ever, even after he does this to you. No, she gulped. Don't think I ever cared two hoots for him. Tears continued to fill her eyes. She knew she was crying because of seeing Cart. Cart so transformed and yet so well known, and because she had suddenly realised that Cart was, and had always been, someone you could tell things to, who after all had always patiently listened to Imogen's grieving. Cart was staring at her. Never cared for him? Now she tells me. You ran away from home after him and actually forced himself to pay for you at art school so you could be near him. And believe me, no one has ever forced himself to pay out so much money in his life. And now you say you never cared for Julian? Who's crazy? You or me? Me, she sobbed. She wanted to say many things, but all she managed was, Monaghan. Oh, Cart sat back, almost out of sight, in sudden sobriety. Her face outlined against Sally's lilies, which someone seemed to have put in a vase, looked very clear and brooding and pale. Now, that's a funny thing, she said. Then after a moment of brooding, yes, I will tell you. Do you remember Will Howard? The one with a face like an otter, the patient said. Cart laughed, a little blurt of merriment. That's him. You were always so good at describing things. Well, you know he's in Canada now. I thought we'd lost touch with him entirely, but this morning, just before Mrs. Gill phoned me, I got a telegram from him. Like to see it? Yes, please. She was astonished. Will Howard. What was such a stay-at-home English kind of boy doing in Canada? Cart stood up to fetch a folded greyish paper from the back pocket of her patched jeans. Holding it spread between both hands, she leant over and displayed it before her sister's watery eyes. The smell of clean hair and health came off her as she leant. I don't smell like that, the patient thought. I have that funny smell people have when they're ill. For a moment, the typed lines of capital letters danced all over the greyer letters printed behind them. Only the word Ontario stood out. She blinked and the letters steadied. Charlotte Melford, Girton College, Cambridge. Remember Monaghan claims a life. July 17th this year. And watch out or try another hen. Stop worried stiff. Howard in the hedge. He called himself that because he thought we might have forgotten him, I think, Cart said. As if anyone could forget Howard. And when I read it first, I thought it was just Howard being silly. Then Mrs. Gill phoned and my spine crawled. I thought, it can't be. It's a day early. Monaghan's cheated. 2 days early, said the patient. It happened last night. Yes, I know, Cart said, sitting soberly down again. But it's occurred to me that there have been 2 leap years since. A grey chill seemed to settle over the little glassed-in antiseptic room. But it's so silly, Cart burst out. Monaghan was just a stupid game, and I curse myself for inventing her. I curse my wretched imagination. I keep on telling myself that Monaghan isn't real. Perhaps it's all a matter of belief. Perhaps you should try very hard not to believe in Monaghan, because I can see you do, just as much as Howard does. She lifted the telegram up to stand for Howard. Stupid boy, she said. Stupid, humble boy. Fancy thinking we might have forgotten him. The water in the patient's eyes welled and rolled away down the sides of her stitched and plastered face. But I have, she confessed. I mean, I haven't forgotten him, but I haven't the faintest memory of him going to Canada. She could see Cart turning to stare at her. It's 7 years since I last knew, she explained. I've been having the weirdest experience. I've been a ghost, and I went home, and you were all there. I saw everyone. Howard was one of the first people I saw, but he was a schoolboy. Don't you really remember? Cart said wonderingly. It was just after the row over the hen, after we'd all been sent to Granny's. Will Howard suddenly turned up at Granny's and mooned about, almost crying. because his parents had decided to take him and live in Canada, and he didn't want to go. We said we'd hide him, but Cart concluded, remembering gloomily. Granny phoned his parents and they came and fetched him away. There was a pause. Then Cart turned to look at her sister again. Ghost, did you say? There was a ghost, or we all thought there was, just before the hen trouble. I think you'd better tell me. She told it, hurrying, sobbing a little and hurrying on. She was suddenly obsessed with the feeling that there was not much time. She told it all, more or less, right up to the exorcism and the farmhouse and Sally's midnight dedication to Monaghan. But what she did not say, and this was the fact pressing behind all the rest which she could not bring herself to tell even Cart, was that she did not know which sister she was. Not Cart, not Sally, she thought as she spoke, so I'm either Imogen or Fenella, but I can't bear Cart to know that I don't know. Cart listened and bent forward with 2 clear creases on her brow, the same clear creases her sister remembered as belonging to Imogen when Imogen was thinking. So that explains the hen, Cart said at length when the story was finished. Funny that none of us knew then, but that's wrong somehow, you know. There's more to it than that. I know there is. I wish I could remember properly. For instance, I knew exactly what Will Howard was talking about in his telegram. I knew it was 7 years, and that Monaghan had demanded a life, but I didn't know how I knew. What I do know is that we sort of understood then and we took some kind of action. Yes, you tried to exorcise me, the patient reminded her, but Cart shook her hanging fair hair vigorously. No, I don't mean that. That didn't work. I remember one of us saying, I forgot which of us, that it was no good trying to be religious about it because we were also very irreligious. And I have a feeling that things we tried after that were all highly irreligious. I know they were. In fact, because that was all part of the hen row. But Cart stopped and sat down looking at her sister with strong anxiety. What? She asked. You can't alter the past, Cart said. The only thing you can alter is the future. People write stories pretending you can alter the past, but it can't be done. All you can do to the past is remember it wrong or interpret it differently. But that's no good to us. I'd forgotten the whole thing until you started talking about it. I think I didn't want to remember it because it was so disturbing. I'd forgotten how keen we all were on Julian Addiman for a start. We were all in a silly, sexy flutter about him because he was different from Will and Ned and the other boys, and he didn't think he had 2 heads like... Who was it that thought he had 2 heads? Nutty Filbert, the patient supplied. Nutty Filbert, said Cart. And he didn't do silly walks or pretend to be spastic like they did. In fact, I think that meant Julian Addiman was probably rather insane even then. And, Cart said, looking rather astonished, the end of that sentence should be, though we weren't to know it. But it isn't, is it? We all knew there was something wrong with him, and we knew it was dangerous, and that's why we were all fascinated. Were we jealous of one another at all? Yes, said the patient. No, not about Julian Addiman. That's the odd thing, said Cart. We were in a way, but actually we were such a unity that when one of us got him, it almost didn't matter which of us it was. You make us sound like vultures or female spiders, her sister protested. Well, we were in a way, Cart said. I thought as I was talking that if none of us really cared 2 hoots about him, even you, well, it makes me wonder if Monaghan wasn't really a manifestation of our common thirst for excitement or our suicidal urges or something. Oh, do stop being so clever, the patient begged her. What are you trying to say? I don't know, said Cart, slumping rather. She put her face in her hands. The ghost was definitely there the next day, she said. I remember that much clearly. It looks as if you haven't finished yet. Her face came out of her hands. She was so full of anxiety again. Count 2 days for leap years and you've got till midnight tonight. Monaghan is playing fair after all. Or someone is. It almost looks as if you're allowed to go back and see what you can do about it, but you can't. Cart suddenly stood up. Why am I sitting here babbling this bloody nonsense? Even if Monaghan exists, no one can alter what's already happened. I know this. I knew it this morning, but even so, I was so damn superstitious that I telephoned Granny when I got Will's telegram to see if Oliver was all right. Oliver, her sister exclaimed. Is Oliver still alive? Oh, yes, said Cart. Didn't I keep forgetting you can't remember. He's oldish, of course, and he smells, and he eats like a pig, but luckily Granny adores him, so he lives with her whilst I'm in Cambridge. I couldn't leave him at home. No one would remember to feed him. Suddenly, without warning or explanation, Cart's face folded together and she began to cry. "What's the matter?" the patient said. Crying seemed infectious and she started to sob herself again. "I'm sorry," wept Cart. She pulled out what she thought was a tissue from her pocket, and she found in time that it was a telegram and wiped her shirt sleeve over her face instead. "Now I've made you cry too. It's just, I dote on Oliver, but seeing you there like that makes me see how much more I love you. You must, when you go back as a ghost, try and make us understand. We may have all been nutcases, but none of us were fools, and..." A nurse was suddenly there, a blurred shape beyond the great white leg. She said to Cart, "Do you mind waiting outside for 10 minutes? Dr. Smith wants to examine Miss Melford." "Of course," said Cart. She bent quickly over the patient and once more brought the smell of health with her. "I've got the key to your flat, so I shall stay in London anyway until you're better. May I use your bed? I know you'll hate the thought of me tidying your things, but I promise to not touch anything, honestly." "That's all right," said the patient. She was aware that the doctor was in the room and that Cart was going away. "Just a moment," she called out. Cart paused. "Are you going to be a teacher?" Funny thing to ask, but it seemed important. Cart hesitated, looking at the dim people crowding into the room. She grinned. She knew why this was important. "Just because Phyllis always said I was going to be. Come off it. It was her way of looking after us, telling us we were all bound for those careers. It made her feel like we were taken care of. I haven't decided what to do yet. It's not that easy to get a job." Then she slipped away. Her place was taken by the dim people and by a great white leg with a nodding face of fat purplish toes.